Good morning, and welcome to First Parish in Milton. My name is Jenny Mulqueen, and I am a member of the Worship Committee. First Parish is a vibrant, welcoming congregation that welcomes all people to grow deep faith and take bold action. We are so glad that you're here with us today. The sanctuary is made holy by your presence. If you are joining us for the first time, please take a welcome packet from the pew rack. There is information about our services and our child care. If you fill out the yellow card inside the packet and drop it into the offering plate, you'll receive our weekly email, and that will help us to get to know you better. My fellow greeters are in the back, and some of us are wearing name tags, and we'll be standing by the doors after worship is over, so please join us, and we can walk over to social hour together and answer any questions that you might have. We strive to make our worship experience accessible to people of all ages and abilities. Please see the welcome card, yes, please see the welcome card for more information on this. And we also have an announcement that when you are going to coffee hour today, you will notice a new art exhibit going up in the link. This new exhibit is by Fuller Village resident Maisie John, who is the mom of First Parish member Cynthia Guys. Also, a reminder that we are still looking for visual art for the next exhibit in January. So please talk with Myrtle Flight or Carl Pastore if you have anything you would like to exhibit. The work of living our faith is done both in and out of worship. So I do draw your attention also to the printed announcements that came with your order of worship. These announcements are important news of our community life, so please read them carefully. And I'm going to invite Tony up for one more announcement.
Good morning, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tony Dutzik. I'm the chair of the Parish Committee, which is our governing board. And I'm here to let you know about some very important and fun things that are going to be happening here next weekend. First Parish is honored to be part of a program this year called Leap of Faith, which is a program that pairs congregations that are looking to grow but facing challenges in meeting their growth goals with congregations that have faced similar challenges in the past, in the hopes that we can learn from one another to overcome the challenges that we're facing. A few years ago, we here at First Parish were a aspiring congregation that was paired with a mentoring congregation in Richmond, Virginia. And several of the members of the travel team, myself, Parish, several other folks, got to go to Richmond and spend a weekend basically being steeped in how their congregation and faith community worked, how they did the governance of the church, how they did worship, how they did religious education, and really being part of their community. Next weekend, we have the chance to be a mentor congregation to an aspiring congregation from Augusta, Maine, who is sending a delegation of 6 people to visit us and spend the weekend finding out what makes First Parish tick and getting to know our community. We're all very excited about it, and I can tell you that from the experience of going to Richmond, we were all those of us who went were just awed by the level of hospitality that we received from their community. And we know that we here in Milton can provide hospitality that is just as good, if not better. So the place where the 2 opportunities that you all have to take part in this and to meet the folks from Augusta and be present for those conversations are on Friday night, this Friday, for the multicultural potluck, which is being organized by the Religious Education Committee and will be taking place in the Parish Hall. That'll be from 6:30 to 8:30. Bring a dish, enjoy company, have a lot of fun. And then they will also be here for worship next Sunday and in social hour afterward. So definitely take the opportunity to say hello, greet people, talk about your experiences. And then for some of you, there will also be a series of meetings and discussions that we'll be having both on Saturday and then after worship on Sunday. So if you get an invitation to take part in one of those, please try to make time in your schedule to take part. Thanks a lot, and I look forward to seeing as many of you as can next Friday night.
As we begin our month of Honoring radical hospitality, you might notice that our altar from Remembrance Sunday and Dia de los Muertos will remain up throughout the month, reminding us that our ancestors are also with us even as we welcome the future into our doors. And if you have additional items that you would like to add to the altar anytime this month, you may bring them forward during the offertory time in worship. You didn't think we'd also get through a month talking about radical hospitality without practicing some different ways of greeting either, did you? So this morning, we say every week that greeting one another is a spiritual practice. The ways that we encounter each other and say hello matter greatly. So this morning, we're going to take a little extra time, and instead of just standing up in your pew and greeting those around you, I invite you to just take a little walk around the sanctuary. And Tim's going to play some music for us. We're going to just take some time and truly greet one another thoroughly this morning. As we make our way back to our pews, you guys are so good at that. Hardly needed any practice at all. Isn't that excellent? Let's rise in body or spirit and sing Over My Head. It's a simple song, so you don't have to be all the way back in your pew to start singing. Ayana Gurn lights our chalice this morning. And let's say together the call to worship. Come, let us gather. We gather to celebrate the sacred within and among us. We come to seek spiritual growth and understanding. We strive to practice acceptance, forgiveness, and love. Together, we work to build a world with justice and compassion. Come, let us gather together. Our opening words are a poem from Rumi, a familiar one, The Guest House. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, for each has been sent as a guide from beyond. This month we explore the journey of welcome, of radical hospitality, the act of welcoming in each guest and visitor by opening the doors of our hearts and of our homes. We begin with a song about opening our hearts.
Let's rest for a while.
Our story this morning comes from the ancient source of Roman mythology, Ovid. I'd like to invite my helpers up this morning. In the Phrygian hill country of Italy, there were once two trees. Everyone was totally impressed with the two trees because one of them was an oak tree and the other was a linden tree, but they grew from the same trunk. This is the story of how that hybrid tree phenomenon came to be. Sometimes the god Jupiter would come down to Earth. He would disguise himself as just a regular person like you and me, and would often travel with the god Mercury, since he was cool to travel with and pretty smart. The purpose of their trip to Earth was always to find out if the mortals, people like you and me, were being kind and welcoming to one another. Jupiter was the god of protection for all who seek shelter in a strange land, so it only makes sense that he would come down to check on the people and make sure they were being welcoming and hospitable to strangers. So the two gods, Jupiter and Mercury, would get themselves into disguises of humans. And they would walk from door to door, asking each homeowner in town to let them into their houses and give them food. But none would let them enter, and the door was often slammed shut in their faces. As they reached the last house they had planned to visit that day, the house that was the poorest on the whole street, the door opened and a warm and cheerful voice said, "Hello," and warmly welcomed them inside. As they came in, an old man told them to sit down and make themselves comfortable by the fire. An old woman spread out a blanket for them. Her name was Bocchus, she told the strangers, and her husband's name was Philemon. As the disguised visitors sat at the dining table, they noticed that one leg was propped up by a piece of a broken dish because it was shorter than the rest, and the furniture was shabby, the cupboards bare. Bocchus and Philemon served food and diluted wine to their guests, and soon they realized that the bowl that they were serving out of kept full no matter how much had been taken out. It seems as though the bowl was bottomless and kept refilling itself. When they noticed this, they became very scared and began to pray silently. Jupiter and Mercury noticed that Bocchus and Philemon seemed frightened by the bottomless bowl and said, "Do not be afraid. You've been hosts to gods, and you shall have your reward. This wicked country that doesn't like poor people shall be punished, but you will not." Jupiter and Mercury brought the elderly couple out of the hut, and they stood in amazement as the countryside they had known before disappeared. A big lake surrounded them. The lowly hut they lived in began to change into a beautiful giant temple of white marble with a roof made of gold. Jupiter then told them that he would grant them a wish. So Bocchus and Philemon huddled together and whispered, trying to decide what their wish would be. When they returned to the gods, Bocchus and Philemon had two requests. The first was that they become priests of the temple that their house had become. The second was that they would not die alone, but together. The gods agreed, and Bocchus and Philemon served as priests in their grand temple for a long time. They lived to a very ripe old age. One day as they sat together talking about their memories of a life well lived in each other's company, each of them noticed that the other was growing leaves. Suddenly, bark began to grow around both of them, surrounding them. They had time only to cry,
"Farewell, dear companion."
As they said those words, they became trees, but they were still together. The linden and oak grew from one trunk, and Bocchus and Philemon were joined in roots, leaves, and branches. Here ends the story. Thank you, helpers. We'll sing the children and adults in our religious exploration program out with Go Now in Peace. Namaste. The greeting many folks know from yoga practice, pointing several fingers outward, thumbs to the center of the chest. A gesture of greeting that says, that within me, which is also a part of you, greets you. The physical gesture connects what's inside with what's outside, sending forth peace and blessing and welcome. I remember when I was first taught this gesture as a teenager at a church youth conference, thinking how exotic and profound and beautiful it was. So much better than our perfunctory greetings in the West. What must it be like, I wondered, to live in a culture where people are so very spiritually focused? Then I met someone from India many years later and asked him about it. It's just like a hello, he said, shrugging. You Westerners think everything we do is some big deal. It's not. He had a point. Who's to say that our greetings in the West are more shallow? Just perhaps that I might not have been mindful enough in general of what a profoundly important act a simple greeting was. I kept wondering how to carry that spirit, that essence of remembering that when I greeted someone, I wanted to be thinking of what part of us was shared, at least as much as what parts of us were different. We're taught so many things about the right way to welcome, most of them so early in our lives we don't really remember learning them at all. And some come from so far back in our cultural history that we don't know the story of how they came to be. When we greet our neighbors every Sunday morning, many of us start with a handshake for those we don't know well. Though it's become known around the world as a gesture of greeting, that handshake was thought to have originated in ancient Egypt, where it was believed that the gods transmitted their blessings to humans through the touch of a hand. And at various times later in history, it was part of a ritual greeting to assure a peaceful meeting, grabbing one another's forearms as a way to check for weapons up the sleeve. Many of us wouldn't think of greeting strangers without a handshake, but there are parts of the world in which it's really only used for business and seems stiff and formal for a first social meeting. And even that simple act in places where we think we are understanding each other and what the norm is can be fraught with complexity. President Obama got grief for fist bumping the First Lady at a major event early in his presidency. George W. Bush was criticized for not doing proper handshakes with world leaders. Who among us has not come away from some simple greeting put off by how firm or how limp a handshake was, or felt a little weary at how long one might have lasted? All that, and we haven't even had to open a door and let someone cross the threshold of our home, or make ourselves vulnerable by sharing something deep from within us. When it comes to greeting the stranger, we arrive with many stories and confusions. Places we know connection might have been possible but had no idea how to make it, or where connection was attempted and spurned. Those uncomfortable questions live alongside our vision of beloved community, that welcome table where all people are able to connect and share wisdom across all kinds of difference, where we're enriched, enhanced, grown by our ability to hold our oneness and our distinctiveness in live tension. Our fears and hesitations are constant challenges to our hopes, correctives to our thoughts that this work might be easy. I know I carry more of those stories than I can properly count, but one I'll share this morning lived with me as a deep knot in my belly for many years. It happened when I was 15. But it starts with the fact that when I was in 12th and in 7th grade, my family moved to a suburb of Columbus, Ohio, where I made what I thought was the best friend I would ever have in the world, as you only can when you're 12. The best of that group of best friends was a girl named Robin. We were tight. So when my family moved in the middle of 8th grade, just 18 months later, I was devastated. How in the world was I ever going to make such good friends again? Ever. I aggressively kept in touch with Robin, writing letters back and forth as fervently as we once had passed notes to each other in class. And Robin herself had moved in a few years to San Diego. And as luck would have it, my family was going on a road trip through Southern California. How great it would be if we could see each other, we thought. So we made arrangements, we two teenagers, and I called her from the place where my family was camping with friends 2 nights before we arrived in San Diego. "I can't wait to see you," she squealed. "You'll have to spend the night, of course." "Let me check with my parents," I said. "I don't know what their plans are." "Mom, Dad, Robin has invited us to stay over in San Diego. Can we please?" I asked. My not normally indulgent parents knew how much I'd missed my friends, and they reluctantly agreed. So off we went to San Diego. We pulled up in front of what to us looked like a huge, modern mansion in a manicured neighborhood. Robin and I greeted each other on the front walk with squeals of delight, and I told her my family was just going to take a minute to get their stuff out of the car. She looked at me puzzled, said, "They're getting out of the car?" I said, "Yeah, you invited us to stay over, remember?" "I invited you to stay over," she said. "Well, let me ask my mom if you all can stay." I was utterly embarrassed. Had no idea how I could have misunderstood what to me was a clear invitation. I was traveling with my family. And an invitation to you had to be plural, or it didn't make any sense, did it? Where would they stay? Robin's parents were quite put out by the request and explained to my father that they only had 3 bedrooms in the house for the 3 of them. My father, further embarrassing me, asked if they could just put their sleeping bags down on the living room floor. We had just been camping, after all. Shock and horror were mirrored on each set of parents' faces, as that too was vetoed. Directions to the nearest motel were given, an expense I knew wasn't in my family's budget for the trip. The plan had been to stop for a couple hours and then drive to another campsite before that invitation to stay over. My parents let me stay, but the knot in my stomach was enormous. I felt selfish, a traitor to my family for a friendship I was now less certain of than ever. The next day, my parents picked me up, and a few hours into the trip, after my sisters regaled me with the story of how nice the hotel was that they stayed in, while my mother fumed in the front seat, my father simply said, "I hope you know that our people always, always make room for guests." Later, I would overhear my parents arguing over the reasons for what they perceived to be rude behavior. For my Iranian father, it was the selfishness of Americans that explained it all. For my American mother, who was raised working class, it was their wealth that explained the lack of hospitality. For me, it was that I should have known better than to assume anything. and further evidence that my culturally strange and financially strapped family would always be misfits. I felt like a complete fool. Now, as a parent of a child who will be a teenager before I know it, living in the suburbs, I too would be put out by the request that a whole family stay with us without notice. I know that internal sigh of exhaustion at the thought of having to be on for people I barely know in my own home, and how much it takes to host even the most familiar of friends. I know that they were not meaning to be selfish or rude or unwelcoming. But I would bet that the story of that awkwardness is one that they tell with equal mystery and equal regret. And I'm willing to bet that you have a story of some awkward moment of meeting the stranger or being the stranger too. A situation where you weren't really sure what you should have done differently, or where your assumptions about how things should work out turned out to be completely wrong. Any of you have a story like that knocking around in your system? Don't worry, I won't ask you to tell it. We arrive at our encounters with strangers wishing to be seen fully, to be known for all of our good intentions, our desire to connect. And yet we hold these misgivings born of hard experience. And though we may have, and I would venture to guess that especially those of us who live with some level of privilege do have far more experiences of generous welcome and inclusion than of awkward exclusion, it's the tough experiences that keep us wary, don't they? Mythology and scripture around the world are full of that command to welcome the stranger, the moral lesson that lives in us as a big, fat should. And we carry that as a little bit of shame each time we find ourselves having to close the door or unable to open it quite wide enough to welcome that one who is asking for our time, for our attention, for our generosity. But I wonder what it might take for us to dwell a bit longer in the beauty of our good experiences than in the tough ones. What if we kept our eye on that ever-refilling bowl of food, the blessing of connection that keeps giving long after our guests have gone, no matter how awkward the visit was or how reluctant we initially might have been at the encounter? It might be as small and fleeting as the joy of a genuine smile of thanks from the person who has asked for change at the car window, or as profoundly humbling as the experience of being hosted generously in international travel by people who live for a month on what we might spend in a day. Radical hospitality. If we are to live it, it has to well up from the root of our beings, has to be grounded very literally, as it was for Bocchus and Philemon, in our spirit's need for connection. We're held firm in that spirit's foundation, that need to reach out and to bring in, to discover that love is our common source and our destination, not in sentimental platitudes, but in active experience of reaching past fear and self-doubt, of risking the awkward and the uncomfortable for the sake of an experience of grace. We have those opportunities all the time. We have that yearning deep in our soul to bring forth the wonder of connection. What if we were to live according to that yearning? What if we were to listen to the vulnerable places in ourselves and bring them forward to connect? This coming week is going to offer lots of opportunities for connection of this kind, as we share some of our cultural backgrounds with each other by bringing favorite foods to a potluck on Friday, as we welcome the travel team from our Leap of Faith partner congregation in Augusta, Maine, through a whole weekend of shared learning and partnership to a Sunday morning celebration of our shared faith. And all week, we'll have opportunities in our lives apart from church, too, to practice bringing in that wonder, to let those vulnerable places in our souls make the risk of connection, to bring forward something that's true and precious and real, and offer it to another. In the name of love, in the name of connection, in the name of God. Let's make our humble offerings to each other. Let the wonder wash over us again and again. Let us do so prayerfully, joyfully, tenderly, with each being we encounter. Amen. We enter into prayer this morning singing a version of the loving kindness meditation of many Buddhist traditions. And we'll sing it through 3 times, each time changing the pronoun. So we'll begin with I, and then you, and then we. Let us enter into prayer through song. Let us pray. Spirit of life, surround us in your loving kindness. May peace and ease be the blessing that flows through us and into the world, especially as we embrace those who are struggling this day. For those in the Philippines and those in Vietnam affected by the tragic consequences of the storm Haiyan or Yolanda. and the tragic consequences of lack of infrastructure that makes that storm so much worse. We hold in our hearts those named among us who are struggling. Steve Weiser, recovering from a stroke. Barbara Harnden and Terry Burke, as they struggle with lung cancer. For all of those who struggle with illnesses of mind, body, or spirit, their loved ones and caregivers, may loving kindness lift them up and carry them. With Tracy, we celebrate love and the memory of her sister Jane, who died 6 years ago, in whose name the flowers are offered this morning. And we remember all of the ancestors represented here on our altar, named and unnamed, who surround us with their love, with their example always. And especially on this Veterans Day weekend, we remember those who serve or have served in our armed forces and their families. May they have the strength to carry on through uncertainty and know they are held too in our embrace. We give thanks for the veterans in our midst, the wisdom they have to share with us from their experience of the realities of war. We honor their service and their ideals. Pray that their dedication to the cause of our nation will not be in vain, that their lives may be honored and celebrated in more valiant efforts at peacemaking. And we remember especially those who have served in our armed forces to return to private wars against poverty, mental illness, and substance abuse. For those who have served our nation so readily and now sleep over subway grates, we offer our communal care and compassion. And we send our prayers for strength, courage, and wisdom to all those elected or re-elected to public office this week. May they see their way to heed the call of compassion and justice over the workings of money and power, and learn new ways to work together for the common good. Let us support them in so doing in every way we can, that together we may discover the spiritual value of our democracy. And we open our hearts most of all this morning to our longing for a world more peaceful, more free, more loving. We come with our questions about how we ourselves can make it so. And we come from our lives already filled to overflowing, and wonder how we will make space for the yearnings of our own deep souls. We offer all of these and so much more as we visit our inner moments, our inner voices in some moments of silence. Amen. We offer ourselves to one another in the tangible act of filling the collection plate on Sunday mornings. And this morning, I wanted very much for us to be able to make our offering to those, especially in our partner congregations in the Philippines affected by the typhoon. However, there aren't relief funds in place yet, so stay tuned for that for next week. And this week, we offer our gifts to one another, to the strength of this faith community, and its continued discernment about the best ways to reach out into our larger community, to practice radical hospitality by living our faith both inside and beyond our walls. The morning's offering will now be generously given and gratefully received. I'll also say, as our musicians get ready, that this song is a familiar one to many of us, made famous by Lou Reed, who passed away recently, and requested by India Ennis as a tribute to him for Remembrance Sunday, but also a song about the deep well of companionship that we can get when we make the risk of connecting. Please join me in the unison dedication. May these gifts be transformed into strength for this faith community, into comfort, food, and shelter for those in need, and may we be transformed by generosity. Please join in singing our final hymn, number 151, I Wish I Knew How. Go forth faithfully risking that feeling of what it is to be free, to find the connections that bind us in love to one another, to plant the seeds of peace and reap the harvest of joy. Go in peace, in faithful service. Amen.